by Adrian Go, who I'm sure you can tell everybody about you, but I know Adrian I used to help with respite care, and Adrian was helping with that as well. And then I saw an article in the paper about him and his journey with epilepsy, and I thought it'd be really nice for him to come talk to us and get his insight on living with epilepsy. And I know also he's on academic challenge for Norwalk High School, and today is his last day of summer vacation. So let's give him a round of applause for joining us on his last day. Instead of sitting outside enjoying the nice warm. I'll hand it over to you, Adrian.
Thank you. So yeah, I am Adrian Go. I'm going to be talking with you guys about epilepsy and what it means to live with that diagnosis of epilepsy. So I'm going to be a senior at Norwalk High School, and being a high school student, I have a lot of experience in the classroom, and I find that for me the best way to learn something is to answer a question about it. So I got a few questions about epilepsy. Can everyone hear me well in the back? Okay. So I got some questions about it. Just raise your hand, answer the question if you can. So my first question
Jen Quicker, please call 117. Jen Quicker, 117.
So my first question is, how many people do you think annually are affected by seizures in the United States? Just throw a number out there. Okay. A couple thousand? Yeah. I'm hearing a couple thousand, I'm hearing a million. The number is 3 million people are affected annually in the US by seizures. That's a big number. So my next question is, with all these people having seizures, about 1 in how many people are going to be affected by seizures in their lifetime? Maybe 1 in 20, 1 in 30? The number is 1 in 10 people. So 10% of the United States is affected, will have a seizure at some point in their life. And real quickly, just saying, the statistics that I got here are from the Epilepsy Foundation, which they're a national foundation that's dedicated to putting that information out there. So my next question is, what percentage of people who are diagnosed with epilepsy are children? And it's an astonishing number. 30% of those diagnosed are children. And so that's a lot of kids with epilepsy. My last question is, my next question, and this deals with SUDE, sudden death triggered by epilepsy. This could be anything from having a seizure and falling and at the wrong place in the wrong time. And the risk for that is 24 times greater than that of someone without epilepsy. Lastly, there's the question that's always posed, how many types of seizures are there? When most people think seizures, they think tonic-clonic, on the floor, convulsing, because that's the most easily recognizable type of seizure. But there are actually 40 plus types of seizures, which can be divided into 2 groups, which are then divided into 2 subgroups. The first group that I'm going to talk about is a generalized seizure. This is a seizure that affects the entire brain. The first type is kind of tough to notice. It's called an absence seizure. This seizure is where they typically have a blank stare. There may be some automatisms, lip smacking, picking at their fingernails, picking at clothes, and these typically are tough to see. And I've had quite a few absence seizures, and I've probably been having them since I was 4, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. The other type of generalized seizure is a tonic-clonic seizure. This is the one that everyone thinks of when they say seizure. This is the one where they're typically on the floor convulsing, vocalizations, the whole 9 yards. The next is a partial seizure. This only affects a small part of the brain, and so they're generally more localized. A simple partial seizure generally results in a sudden jerking in a specific part of the body. There's typically no loss of consciousness, and it can sometimes be associated with synesthesia, which is the confusion of the brain of the senses, which could result in someone hearing colors maybe, or seeing smells. And that's just your brain trying to make sense of all these sensory inputs. A complex partial seizure may have an aura, so you may get some sort of a warning beforehand that you're going to have a complex partial seizure, but most of the time you don't have one. And this generally is the hardest one to spot because it results in automatisms like walking, or simple habitual things, lip smacking, picking at your clothes, fumbling, and you're completely unaware of your environment. I had several complex partial seizures. The one that comes to mind first off is I was with my family. We went to Blockbuster back when the family video in Norwalk was a Blockbuster, and I was wandering around, and to someone, your average onlooker who wasn't well educated in epilepsy or seizures, I was just wandering around looking at the videos. But my family knew that there was something up, and they saw me wandering around, and I was completely unresponsive. And that's what a complex partial seizure looks like. So, now that I've talked a little bit about myself, let me tell you my story.
There's noise. Can you turn that noise down?
I can't turn the noise down. Sorry about the noise on the speakers. Now, when I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with a craniopharyngioma. And what that is it's a rare form of brain tumor. And this particular craniopharyngioma was occurring in my left frontal lobe. I was 4 years old at the time, and here's a picture of me about a month before I had my first surgery. And just by looking at me, you can't really tell that I've got something going on in my head. But I did. The diagnosis came because I was having a lot of frequent mood swings. I was getting these terrible headaches, and I was sleeping for long periods of time. And my mom saw this and said, hey, there's something up, let's get something looked at. Well, they did a scan of my brain and they found a tumor. So I had a craniotomy. They cut my head open and they removed the tumor. Unfortunately, this did not entirely get rid of the problem. The tumor did recur, and I went through experimental chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and that for the most part took care of the tumor itself. Now, the rest of the associated medical conditions, including but not limited to pituitary insufficiency, cortisol deficiency, hormone deficiency, diabetes insipidus, and a whole host of other medical conditions, those are pretty well medicated and pretty well taken care of by that medication. And everything was pretty hunky-dory until I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 12. What happened was I was in orchestra class, and I reeled backward in my chair and started having a tonic-clonic seizure. My orchestra instructor quickly called an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital. My mom had never seen any seizures that I would have had before, although in hindsight I probably was having absent seizures from the age of 4, right after my surgery. I was always my parents' absent-minded professor because I would always just sort of stare off into space. And my mom always figured, hey, I was deep in thought about something philosophical when it was probably an absent seizure. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and after a year of taking various medications, some of them worked really well, some of them worked too well, some of them didn't work well enough, some of them I was allergic to. After a year of going through that, I had a craniectomy. So they found that there was an arachnoid cyst pressing on my left frontal lobe. So they reopened the incision from the craniotomy, and they removed the arachnoid cyst, some scar tissue from the first surgery, and part of my left frontal lobe. So naturally, the diagnosis of epilepsy carries with it quite a few challenges. Probably the biggest side effect, the biggest challenge is the medical side effects. When I was taking a certain medication, I would feel completely out of it. And it would be kind of like I was in my own little bubble. And it felt like everything around me, the best way that I could describe it is it felt like everything was moving in slow motion. And I was very zombie-like under it. And it was very tough to think. And when you're in middle school and high school and you're taking honors courses, you need to be able to think. So that was a tremendous issue. Then there's the whole idea of you can be allergic to your medication. One of my medications gave me this all-over rash. And so that was kind of a big issue. And so those side effects, it's a balancing act. Do I want to have my seizures well controlled, but be, zombie and overtaken by my medications? Or do you want me to have some seizures but be able to think clearly? And that's a very tough balancing act. The next issue is obviously that of seizures. Seizures are a scary thing. Now, I had tonic-clonic seizures, and this frightened my classmates. Seizures are a scary thing for the person having it and for the people who are witnessing it. Because when you see your son or daughter or best friend have a seizure and you've never seen it before, it's a scary thing, even if you have seen it before. I had a seizure in a math class in middle school, and my best friend in middle school went home crying because he said Adrian died in math class today. And so my classmates didn't understand it. I also had issues with memory, and alongside those seizures came this amnesia that was associated with it. I had French class, freshman and sophomore year of high school, and my doctors later determined that I was probably having seizures as a result of my medicine wearing off. But I would go into French class, behave normally, well, what she thought was normally. It's kind of, like I said, it's tough to spot an absence seizure, and it's even tougher to spot an absence seizure when you're in a classroom full of students who are all basically doing the same thing, just kind of zoned out in their own little world. Yep, I hear every word you're saying. And so it's tougher to spot that when you're in a classroom full of students who are basically doing the exact same thing. But, one instance, I was in French class. I walked in, had the absence seizure, walked out, didn't remember a thing that happened. If you were to look at my grade card, you would see my grades steadily declining because I was taking tests in the class over things that I didn't think I had learned because I would be forgetting the entire class. There's also this issue of confusion after a seizure. One instance, I walked down to the office and I had some pain in my leg, some tension. It felt like I maybe had a seizure. I had this nasty headache, very tired. So I walked down and said, hey, I think I had a seizure. Could you call home? And so they called my mom and I asked if I could use the restroom. So I went, yeah, sure, there's a restroom right around that. And so I walked around into the office restroom and I proceeded to have an absence seizure in the restroom. When I came to, I thought I was still at summer camp. When you are in a restroom and hey, I'm still at Blue Lake, and you open the door and you don't even recognize the hallway, hey, this isn't the med cabin at Blue Lake. This is somewhere that I don't remember. And you don't recognize it. It's a scary experience when you walk up to the secretary and say, hey, could you please explain to me what this place is? I think I must have had a seizure. And I don't remember it. And they say, oh yeah, this is Norwalk High School. You go here. You've been in the bathroom for 20 minutes. It's a scary experience. Right along with my surgery came these issues with executive functioning. I kind of lost my ability to keep things organized and make lists and remember things. And so I had a lot of just issues with executive functioning. And the last issue is that of stigma. And there's a lot of social stigma with people with epilepsy. And there's a lot more than a lot of people are willing to admit. There's become this tremendous following for people with autism and Down syndrome, and they've got all these organizations dedicated to the advocacy. Well, for epilepsy, there's the Epilepsy Foundation. They're a national association dedicated to providing information and resources for people with epilepsy. And I've actually got some handouts over on the table over here. Feel free to pick them up. Those are courtesy of the NCPA, the National Center for Project Access, which is a division of the Epilepsy Foundation dedicated to providing materials. But this issue of stigma. I had a seizure in class. Nobody knew what to think of it. I told you my best friend thought I had died. Another kid, he immediately after I started seizing jumped up and said, I didn't do it. They had no idea what was happening. So I came in the next day and people were wondering, what happened? I had someone come up to me and ask, I heard you got shot in math class. That's how those rumors spread around. I said, no, I had a seizure in math class. And I know that this is a tough word with this particular audience, and I'm going to use it very sensitively, but I had several people ask me if I was retarded. And that's a very hurtful thing to be asked in middle school if someone comes up to you. Adrian, are you retarded now? And no, I'm exactly the same as I was. I just have seizures. I lost a lot of my best friends because I had a seizure, and they thought they were scared to hang around me because I was the sick kid, I was the seizure kid, and they didn't want to hang around me because they were scared they were going to catch epilepsy. And so to kind of illustrate my point, I've actually got a clip from a video, came out I believe in 2009, it's called Tower Heist, but...
Do remember you. You're a little seizure boy. You have the seizures all the time. No, I never had the seizures. Mind is smashed. I remember you were rolling up in the mouth with your eyes closed on your nose. Spirit skin. That was you. A lot of people have asked me when the kids one big deal after you were a seizure boy. You'd be on the floor rolling all around. You would have seizures. It doesn't cause seizures. Right? You didn't have to take out on the table with your ass. Like that time it was coloring you or nothing. All the seizures and nobody want to catch them.
So that's just sort of a little illustration of my point of the stigma. Eddie Murphy, he's explaining, hey,
You just want to, that noise.
Yeah, that-
It's really annoying for probably being painful, so.
Yeah.
Do you think you could talk about it without that?
how can you guys hear me in the back?
That's good, I think.
Okay. So that kind of illustrates the stigma. I've got Eddie Murphy in there talking about, oh yeah, you were the little seizure boy. Yeah. Even better. So I got Eddie Murphy. Hey, you're the little seizure boy. For a long time, I was the little seizure boy. No one wanted to hang out with me. No one wanted to play with me. No one wanted to sit and eat lunch with me because they were scared of catching it. So here's how I kind of overcame those challenges. The first one, I externalized. Like I said, I lost a lot of my memory, my executive functioning, and so I had to find resources outside of my body. I had to kind of externalize my left frontal lobe. I am a big proponent of smartphones. I love my iPhone. I love the fact that I can go into my iPhone and enter a date on my calendar, and it'll give me like a text reminder saying, hey, you've got such and such at 6 o'clock. I love that feature. I am a big proponent of Google Calendar on laptops. I have Google Calendar that I have synced to my phone, and I just enter dates in there, my homework assignments, and I get text reminders on my phone. Hey, you got a psychology essay due tomorrow. And so, I get those little reminders, those little pushes. And along with my memory and my executive functioning, I lost quite a few more motor functions, and it's tough for me to type. And so typing for me is a tough thing. And so I downloaded something called Dragon Naturally Speaking by the Nuance Company. And that allows me to dictate essays and things. And so whenever I have to write something, instead of typing things, I can just ramble on and just say, hey, I want to say this and this and this and this and this in my essay, and just sort of wrangle into the computer, and it types it all down for me. The next thing that I want to say to do is advocacy. I am a huge self-advocate. This can be anything from saying to the doctor, hey, my medication makes me feel kind of funny. Do you think we could play around, tweak it a little bit? It's anything from that to me going up to my professors and saying, hey, I have seizures, I need some accommodations, how can you help me? And along with that advocacy thing, there is something, like I said, the National Center for Project Access, the NCPA. I am a youth representative on that council, and we are trying so hard to get all these resources out to everybody that we can. And so if you want to check us out, we are epilepsyfoundation.org. If you want to go there, the website is all over those pamphlets, believe me. But that'll help you kind of advocate for yourself. So now I'm going to dispel some common myths about epilepsy. And these are myths from all times, and the first one that kind of popped up, and these were the first things that scientists now believe are seizures, and that's the idea that a seizure is a form of spiritual possession. I'm here to tell you that when I have a seizure, it's not because I'm possessed by demons. But, one of the symptoms of spiritual possession or demonic possession is speaking in tongues. And when you have a tonic-clonic seizure, you produce what are called vocalizations, which are a result of contractions in the lungs, and in the chest, and in the larynx. And it produces a wheezing sort of a sound. Kind of, and it sounds like you're trying to say something. Couple that with drooling and saliva, you produce this gurgling gobbledygook that could be interpreted as another language. So right along with that is the idea that you can swallow your tongue during a seizure and choke on it. That is absolutely not true. Let me tell you, your tongue is attached to the bottom of your mouth. You're not going to be swallowing it anytime soon. But there was a time 20 or 30 years ago where all teachers had a little drawer, and in it was, a tongue depressor with a cotton swab or cotton ball tied with tape so that they could put it in a student's mouth if they were having a seizure. And even today, I would talk to my classmates and I'd say to them, hey, I have seizures. Do you know what to do? They'd say, oh, you stick a spoon in your mouth. Do not stick anything in my mouth. But, your tongue is attached. It's not going to get, that comes right along with the vocalizations. It sounds like you might be choking on something. It's a side effect of the tonic-clonic seizure. The third myth is that all seizures, no matter what, are 911 emergencies. This is only going to end up costing you extra time and extra money. Please talk to your doctors to say, hey, is every seizure that my child has a 911 emergency? Are all my seizures going to be 911 emergencies? Should I always call an ambulance? Because a lot of times you can just let the seizure run its course and save yourself thousands of dollars in hospital bills. And you trust me, you don't want to be spending an extra couple $1,000s on hospital bills on top of the fact that your child had a seizure. So talk to your doctors and see if you can come up with maybe a seizure plan to take care of that. So the next one, right along with those seizure plans, is that you need to hold a person down when they're having a tonic-clonic seizure. Most of the time you don't want to do that because a tonic-clonic seizure is strong, rapid contractions in the muscles. And if you hold a person down, the muscles can't contract naturally and it can cause injury to the muscles and the ligaments. So again, talk to your doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not here to give medical advice. Talk to your doctors. But chances are it's going to be worse for your child if you hold them down during a tonic-clonic. So the next one, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, and this is more common with the younger audience, is that epilepsy is contagious. You cannot catch epilepsy. I can't sneeze near you and have you catch epilepsy. It doesn't work like that. It's an issue in your brain. It really can't be spread. But right along with the spread of it is the idea that you are born with epilepsy. That is not always true. You can be born with a genetic condition that puts you at a predisposition for epilepsy. And a lot of people who, have epilepsy do carry these genetic predispositions. But a lot of times it could also occur as a result of TBI, traumatic brain injury. Someone gets in a car accident, injures their brain produces more electricity than it should, seizure. And the last one is that there is only one type of seizure. There are 40 plus kinds of seizures. It's just that everyone thinks of a tonic-clonic when they hear the word seizure. And so it's just a matter of knowing and recognizing signs and things. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Feel free to ask me anything you want. Yes?
What do you want to do after graduate?
I would like to be a cognitive neurologist. I'd like to study the effects of music on the brain. When I was 4 years old and I was diagnosed with craniopharyngioma, I had no idea what that was. And so the way that I explained it to myself was it's a bubble of music that needs to be let out. I always had this affinity for music and I love music. And interestingly enough, violin has been a huge help to me. I've played the violin ever since I was 5, stuck with it. But I'd like to further study the effects of music on the brain because music has been proven to be extremely therapeutic. Yes?
The article I read in the paper was such a nice article on your when
You just talk about the presentation that I gave.
Yeah, and how that all came about.
Okay. I gave a presentation for various grantees for the National Center for Project Access and the Epilepsy Foundation. And I was talking about transitioning from high school to college with epilepsy, transitioning from childhood to adulthood with epilepsy, and what that means. I was And so one of the things that I touched on was transitioning from a 504 plan to an IEP. In high school, you might have an independent education plan. And so this is something where they say, hey, this kid has such and such, you need to help with them by doing this and this and this. Well, they don't have those in college. They have Section 504 plans, where an IEP is you have to do this or else. A 504 plan is more of a set of suggestions that the student, it's got to be done on the student end. And so I talked a lot about advocacy and saying to your professors, hey, I need some accommodations, could you help me out here? And things like that. And that came about because I am a youth member on the National Center for Project Access Board. And one of the people who is from our district, Tatiana Falcone, who is someone that I work with, she said to me, hey, would you like to come and present about transitioning to college with epilepsy? And I said, well, sure, it'll be fun. I get to go to Washington, D.C. And it was a nice trip. But I got to present alongside two other people who had already completed that transition to college, and I was about to transition to college, and so I was able to provide my viewpoint as I'm going through it. Anything else?
Adrian, can you tell us a little about all the different activities you've been involved in, throughout high school?
Oh yeah. So high school. High school has been kind of a fun, busy time for me. She had mentioned earlier that I am on the academic challenge team. We've done very, very well. We actually recently tied with Edison for championship last year. So I've been on the Firelands Challenge team. I'm in the drama club. We recently put on Singing in the Rain, and I was R.F. Simpson in that. So when we do musicals, I always take part in that. I was a part of the student council my freshman year, Key Club. So I got a lot of extra. I'm in the orchestra. We've got a string quartet that I'm a part of. So all these different school-related extracurricular stuff. Yes?
Is this going to prevent you from driving, or do you drive?
It does prevent me from driving. I'm actually going to be speaking with an epileptologist in August because it's been so long since I had a seizure. He might be able to give me permission to drive. But for most people with epilepsy, it will prevent them from driving. And that's kind of a big issue when you're a teenager. Everyone's all excited, yeah, I turned 16, get my driver's license. And I wasn't able to say that. I still have to, bum rides off of my friends and, pay for gas and things. And so it's tough not being able to drive myself places. That it? Yes?
How proud is your mother?
Well, she's not here in this room today. She's actually a school counselor at New London, but she's extremely proud. She loves to say, hey, my son has overcome all these challenges. She's been my biggest supporter through my entire life. She's been backing me up. She has said, I will support you in whatever you decide to do. And so she's probably been my biggest help. So yeah, to all the parents out here, you deserve a round of applause. Because you're the people that are really helping your kids. You're their biggest supporter and their biggest advocate. Anything else? All right, and like every good high school student, I cited my sources. All of my statistical data came from the Epilepsy Foundation. That graphic that had the different types of seizures and the classifications and things, that's Epilepsy Foundation Northwest, and they work out of Washington State. And so, but I mean, it's transferable knowledge. And then that clip came from the movie Tower Heist, which came out in 2009. So for anyone that wants information, I do have some handouts over here on the table. Feel free to pick one up. They're courtesy of the NCPA. I got, set questions that, FAQs about seizures, what do I do as a kid with epilepsy, all that good stuff's right over there on the table. So feel free to check them out. Thank you.